So I'm calling the meeting to order. This is the Committee on Economic Development and Planning. My name is Ken Wilden, the chair. Vincent Petrelli is the secretary. Lisa Feltner is the vice chair. We received a referral to discuss whether there are appropriate modifications to the zoning ordinance regarding excavation work that will provide more protection to neighbors. So I guess the first thing I'll do is open it up to see if any members of the public wish to be heard on this topic. Seeing none, I'd open it up to the, I was really hoping one of the counselors who referred it would be here, but seeing how that's not the case. For the folks at home, zoning related to regulations related to soil removal are found in section 8 of our zoning code. I guess I'll open it up to.
I'm sorry, referring to section 8?
Yeah, section 8 of.
I wasn't sure which.
Of the zoning ordinance.
If we were going to look at it.
Yep.
Specific.
So the referral was to consider whether appropriate modifications needed to protect neighbors. So I guess I'll ask first Community Development and Planning if they think there are any, and if there are, we could consider them, and if there aren't, can definitely entertain a motion to adjourn.
Just a little bit of suggestion in that intro.
Leading the witness.
So from my perspective, I really am not sure that we need to change anything. I think the one case that we had that was an example on Salisbury was an unfortunate situation. But the number of places where we have, significant ledge being removed for, construction projects is pretty limited. Having said that, of course, on the flip side of that is as well, if it's not something that happens very often, then putting a set of rules in place really will only deal with those situations. So having said that, if the council wanted to pursue with some language, I'm sure that we could, and I, could craft some examples of some language we could use. I did craft something in preparation for tonight's case. I think going back to the counselor's question, I'm not sure this is really necessary, but again, if you felt that it was important to provide some additional community meeting related to this type of work, then this is an option, adding ledge to the soil removal, and then adding a paragraph that would be, if ledge is to be removed when incidental to and in connection with other construction as described above, then a community meeting will be held prior to any such removal in accordance with section 903, which is a community meeting aspect, to discuss the extent of the removal, methods to be utilized, and the timing and duration of such work, unless determined by the director DCDP, got an extra O there, to be less than a significant quantity. And that's some potential language. If you wanted to do something, I will be honest with you, I'm not sure how even if there was ledge, the instance where the town would necessarily be aware of that prior to them preparing to do work. And a property owner might be aware because they'll do soil borings and those types of things. But in terms from a zoning perspective, I'm not sure we'd even be aware of that until they got out there and started doing work and then have to stop work and have a community meeting to discuss about how they're going to go about it. I'm just not sure how effective that would be.
Questions from the committee?
Well, yeah, so I guess there's a lot of questions in my mind, but one would be, how does I'm assuming that the plan, specifically we're talking about building permit, right? Or if you could review on the process, like when would you make a site review? Or you just said the town wouldn't know that there was ledge until they started excavating. Is there something you could do in the planning or application process that would flag potential, this is unusual site, or without just kind of taking the word, I guess, of applicant, given that people aren't necessarily as forthcoming as they should be, maybe, with what they're doing?
So I guess I would describe two situations. One, a bigger project where there's a lot of things going on, lots of evaluation analysis by the applicant in town. In that case, I don't think this would be an issue because I think that would all be well known by everyone before they started work. The situation like Salisbury,
Yeah.
where, at least in that case, I think there was knowledge that there was ledge there. It was very obvious physically from just looking at it, it's sticking out of the ground. The lot was nothing but ledge. So obviously in that situation, we would know. Are there situations between, a single family or two family construction where we're not aware there being ledge there? Sure, there could be that situation, and they go to dig a foundation or basement and, hit ledge prior to getting deep enough for the basement. At that point, or prior to that, when they're applying for their building permit, no, we likely wouldn't know that. I suppose if the applicant knew that that was the site conditions they'd have, then they probably would do some engineering analysis about that and might make that, part of their submission. But if it was an unknown situation that the applicant and the town, yeah, they could get out there and start digging, hit ledge and say, ooh, I got an issue here.
I guess, you said in this case, is there language we have when it's obvious? Because this says incidental to, I don't know in permit language if that means minor. To me, that means minor. But in the Salisbury case, my understanding is that was a necessary part in order to build what they wanted to build there. And so, I'm mostly thinking about internal oversight suggestions for whether it's, the discussions came out, was that the boundaries weren't clearly marked. I don't know if you saw that or not when they were excavating, or maybe stakes were moved, I'm not sure, but,
Well,
or if you think that's more like inspection oversight once they get going, or is there things we can do before and our
I
notification?
think that
of others?
situation wasn't one of the property corners not being marked or unknown. It was that the 8 or 10 inches of rubble that was adjacent to a foundation, when they removed the rubble from their property, that just fell into their property, and so they removed that too because it was rubble. It was, and it wasn't what they had jackhammered into rubble. It was already rubble. Doesn't grow grass, doesn't grow vegetation. It was, for all intents and purposes, a nuisance. So they removed it with every intention of backfilling and creating a much more pervious and landscaped rear yard to their property, and did. They have backfilled it up so it's back where or above where that earth was adjacent to the adjoining property's foundation. I have, well, I'm not an engineer, I'm not a geotechnical engineer, so, take this with a grain of salt, but I feel very comfortable that what they did has made no damage to the adjoining property. If anything, it improved their property, and as a result, in the end, they'll be left with a better situation than they had previously. Obviously, a lot of pain and suffering in between then and now, and in a lot of cases unnecessarily. But having said all that, I'm not sure what the solution is in that case, or what it is as a council, what direction you'd like us to take, particularly in terms of an ordinance amendment.
Well, I was thinking, and I guess, we don't have the documents in front of us of what someone has to submit when they're doing a project like this, of what the checklists look like, or is there, just like, you wouldn't normally, this project was by right? There wasn't a special
Correct.
permit. So we wouldn't normally have, unless you're a tear down, notify abutters. But given the properties being so close to each other, and, noise impacts and all that, and just kind of scary, hey, what's going on? is there something just in terms of communication notifying that something's going to happen versus a community meeting where they have to present their project, but there's a notification that goes out because it's not your typical, like you said, this doesn't happen very often. It's kind of pretty unusual where they would.
So for a demolition, you do have to notify the neighbors before
Right.
you do that. So, yeah, they would do that. So,
So on that I'm thinking like on the demolition form, could you say it would specifically on the notice call out that there will also be, in this instance, excavation required of ledge or.
so if it was,
Call it.
if it were obvious and we
Another
knew
term for it.
that was gonna happen, then sure, that could be part of the conversation.
Yeah.
In that instance where it's below ground and nobody knows it's there until they start digging.
Yeah, right.
If they
That,
demo a house that doesn't have a basement and they wanna put in a house with a
Right.
basement, and they hit ledge, then at that point.
'cause what
So I guess my question would be, at that point, what does the council want us to do for them to provide the neighbors? And with the understanding that in that instance, hypothetically speaking, they've pulled a building permit to do something by right. They've started construction and have all their contractors lined up. They've discovered some problem in the hole in the ground. So what do we want to do at that point? Our public meeting, community meeting process says you gotta notify people at least 2 weeks ahead of time. So that's at least a couple of weeks. We wait till we have the meeting. We'd have the meeting where they would say, yeah, well, we demoed the house and we're digging a hole and there's ledge there, and so we need to jackhammer it up, and it'll take us a week or so with a big piece of equipment. I mean, I guess there's
Well,
some
in other words,
benefit to
so
that.
there's two instances. One where they come in knowing they have to do it, and
Yep.
that could be notified as part of the demo that, a sentence goes in there as part of the demolition, we will also be. So it's not a community meeting, but it's part of the notice that already goes out.
Yep.
And then the other is you're talking about where it's kind of surprise, unknown. Again, I don't know. I'm assuming that there would be a conversation back with the building or planning saying, oh my gosh, we found this, or would they go ahead without it at that point too? Could there be a notification versus a 2-week delay of just, so those are kind of the main things that, right now that
Yes, I guess as a strictly zoning issue, which is the referral, doesn't make much sense to change any language because the process in place is fine for what this section is intending it to be. So I'm fine not making any changes.
And I think in that sense, we can certainly make efforts to make that better known to neighbors when we know that there is a situation. And I think Peter's very aware of that and will do that.
If any of you have a question, too.
Yeah, so two things. So one is, so my own personal experience with ledge is when we built our new garage. They went in to put in the footings, and lo and behold, 2 feet down, they hit ledge. And they were able to, they were trying to go 4 feet low grade for the footings. They removed most of it just with the backhoe. They couldn't get all of it, so they ended up just roto hammering holes into it, putting pins and pouring the foundation on the edge of the ledge. So again, there was ledge removal going on there, but it was just being done as part of the excavation process and did not involve
Blasting or-
a hydraulic ram. So I have a little bit of a problem the way this is written, because it says if ledge is removed, well, you can remove ledge with the bucket of a backhoe because it's loose and flaky, and I'm not sure that's what we want to do.
Nope.
So going to this specific, let's just talk about this specific language. So two things. I think if we were to do this, this only really applies to as of right projects that are not getting a special permit, because a special permit goes, as you had mentioned, goes through a whole other much more complicated process, including site plan review. So I think only as of right projects. So that would be my first thing, or my second thing in terms of the first one being the removal by excavation. I think we would not want to apply. So to sort of get right to the point of it, the issue is not the removal of ledge.
Mhm.
The issue, I believe, on Salisbury Road, which got people upset, was the using a hydraulic rock breaker, a vehicle-mounted, excavator-mounted hydraulic rock breaker, uh, is part of the process without any notification. And as you recall, as sort of the discussion about building permits, the specifically were told in writing that they could not do that by the building inspector, and then they actually did it, and they did it for 2 weeks. So I believe the issue is if you were to look at this sentence, we would only want to regulate in the zoning the employment of a mechanical rock or hydraulic rock breaker to remove ledge on projects that are not going through a special permit with site plan review. I think that's really the issue, and I don't think we want to be able to ban it, but I think we want to be able, the key is sort of the notification and the ability for the abutters to actually weigh in on the means and methods of doing that, because people are concerned. They want to ask, the ability to ask questions: how will this affect my house? Will this crack my foundation? What's the noise going to be? How long is it going to take? And I think those were the things, if those questions had been answered ahead of time at the Salisbury Road project, we would not be sitting here today to discuss this.
They couldn't have because they did it without permission.
Well, they did it without permission, and
So they couldn't have answered those questions ahead of time.
well, they could have answered it ahead of time if they had planned, if they had agreed that they were going to do that. And I guess the frustration that I think some people felt is that there was no place in the zoning ordinance that we could have issued them a stop work permit to say, you will stop work until you come up with a plan and have a community meeting and present it to the public. Correct me if I'm wrong, but that, Steve, seemed to have been, reading the hundreds of email pages that were involved in this project, that seemed to be the crux of the matter, that despite people's complaints, they were still out there every morning hydraulic ramming away at that ledge.
Well, and I guess I would say two things to that. One, I think the concern, a lot of the concerns that was expressed were that he had agreed to have a community meeting if he was going to do that, and he didn't. Well, at that point, it was kind of, the horse was out of the barn, which I think created a lot of frustration. I think, obviously another part of that was impact on, the trees on the adjoining properties, the impact on the adjoining foundations and those types of things, which that's, obviously still an issue for abutters. Part of what we talked about the last time we had a meeting on this, but so how much of that would have been satisfied by having a community meeting? It certainly would have helped. I think it certainly would have addressed the issue if he had agreed with the previous building inspector to do it, and he didn't. And again, I think going forward today with nothing changing, I think Peter would, Peter McLaughlin, the building inspector, he would take similar action to what Ken had suggested.
But was there, and again, I seem to recall that there was, the zoning enforcement officer said there was really no basis for him issuing, in the zoning ordinance, prohibiting what they were doing and enforcing them to stop. Is that a fair statement?
And I would say there's a difference between having an arrangement with a builder when they are coming in for a permit, making arrangements as to how that project's going to proceed versus, ostensibly after the fact saying, you really should have had a community meeting, but it was kind of late for that.
So I guess, let me just, if I could just
Yeah.
follow. So I guess, so does it, if that is our expectation, that the building inspector would require that as a condition of the building permit, shouldn't we just make that explicit? And so everybody knows. I mean, I think there's, you know, and I guess, you know, while I trust the building department, you know, to do things, sometimes just having it written down exactly what everybody's supposed to do, so both the petitioners and the department knows that this is exactly what the expectation is. And again, even to your situation, the sort of the unknown site conditions, you know, you get a permit, you start building a house, you start digging away, and it's like, lo and behold, there's ledge 2 feet under the ground. Okay, you know, you could remove it with the backhoe, you could maybe bring a handheld jackhammer and you know, eat around the edges of it. But what you can't do is just show up one morning with a, you know, hydraulic ram and just start banging away at the rock for 2 weeks without some additional permission. So that's, I would, the concept of this this paragraph here, if that could reflect that, just the requirement that if, in my mind, if you're gonna employ hydraulic rock breaker or an excavator mounted rock breaker on a project, an as of right project, to remove ledge, you will be required to hold a community meeting 2 weeks ahead of time. Whether it's before the project starts, before you get the building permit, or you already demolished the house and you're starting to dig the new foundation hole and you discover you need to do something different. In my mind, it doesn't matter when. It's just stop work and say, okay, everybody, this is what we're going to do, and here's how we're going to do it. Any questions? And then you get everybody's happy, and then you go ahead and do it. And I just think that that's, and in my mind, I just think that the what we need to add here is just the requirement to have that meeting before you employ such a hydraulic excavator mounted rock breaker.
Sorry, real quick. If it's part of the building permit, could you just say that? Could you say you're prohibited from using certain types of equipment, or is that not something you see in a building permit? Like,
I would say as a matter of course, I probably wouldn't suggest that,
Yeah.
but if there are a particular set of circumstances, sure. You know, the building inspector could condition a permit to put.
how many times
specific
is this hydraulic
limitations.
thing that Vinny's talking about used in Watertown on a yearly basis?
On a project, it's not a special permit. I mean, a project is a special
I
permit,
would
they use
say
them
this
all
is
the
the only
time.
one I'm aware of.
Because most lots, yeah, there's a few.
Only one I'm aware
I get-
of. There may be others, but.
There's a
this
few
one I'm aware
lots,
of.
there's a few lots on Waverly Avenue with, you can see ledge poking up out of the front yards and things, so I guess we don't wanna prohibit the use of the tool. It's just, we want to regulate the use of the tool, and regulate it by, not saying you can't do it, but that you need to do proper notification and take mitigation if necessary. Because there may be difference between rock breaking in the middle of a lot and rock breaking on rock that's on sort of the property line, you know, I mean, depends.
So at least you have a question.
So yeah, I guess the one thing I heard is that there was a note in the building permit about the community, but also, you know, coming back with the town if they did that, and they didn't, but then we weren't able somehow to enforce that, so that's why the concern of, I'm not sure if you need the 2-week notice but I agree some kind of notification needs to be done, but have the power to, if we're gonna point to the zoning ordinance to enforce, like Vinny is suggesting, that if, you know, if this equipment, I don't know if you specifically say hydraulic ram, or if non-mechanical rock breaking equipment needs to be employed, you must meet with
Yeah.
So I guess his.
at a timely basis
I
so
guess,
that the
so
zoning
we're all
officer
understand
feels
this.
empowered to act
Yeah.
if
Does
someone's
this
doing
equipment always disturb the neighbors? Like, is there a situation where, what are we talking about in terms of?
Well-
if this was happening next door to me, what would the effects be on me?
So I would say, two obvious things, noise and vibration, it's, pretty, in terms of construction equipment, it's pretty intrusive.
Yeah.
So, yeah, no, I think that
Yes.
if there are neighbors nearby, yeah, no, I think
Because the
that's.
vibrations also like disturb rodent burrows and stuff. I mean, there's more than,
So they were fixing.
bigger
They were
impact.
fixing something on Lexington Street right outside my window, and it was the same thing. There's noise and vibration. Do you think it'd be comparable to that? I don't know what equipment they were using.
So like a handheld
I
jackhammer.
assume so.
So if you,
But,
if
yeah,
you don't have a jackhammer like in a
Yeah,
transistor.
yeah.
Okay, it's like 10 times that. I mean, it's
Just much more powerful.
it's just much more.
Sure.
So I would,
Through the ground.
I would say we wouldn't want to prohibit or regulate handheld jackhammers.
Yeah.
Because those are used all the
So
time.
were they using it outside of permitted construction hours?
No, they were using it.
Oh, okay.
But it's just, it's one of these, it's one of these, it's
but you
one
said
of
that
these
there
things.
was, he knew that he
Yeah.
shouldn't have done some things, and then the zoning office felt like they couldn't enforce because we didn't have the language in the
Sure.
zoning to point to.
So what would have been, I guess, all right, so let's say they had a community meeting, and what would they have said? There's nothing to stop the person from using that equipment that's needed for that project. They're using it during construction hours. What else?
Well,
What am I missing? That,
department would have discretion.
to say what though?
Well,
To say what, you
there may
can't
be
do this?
better alternatives, or within certain hours, or like Vinny said, depending on where it is on the project, or how much, or if there's.
This sounds like a
Trees
last
and
alternative.
paths.
Like, no one wants to do this. It sounds expensive.
Well, I agree,
Yeah.
but
Like, what would have changed if
Well-
what would be the best result of that meeting? This goes into effect. They have a meeting. What would change?
So I guess my best case scenario would be there would be a meeting of the minds between the neighbor and the property owner about how they would go about it. He'd say, I think I'm gonna be out there for a week jackhammering this stuff. They'd say, well, we really wish you wouldn't use that piece of equipment. Maybe you could do it with a hand jackhammer. And he says, well, okay, but if I do that, it's gonna be 3 times as long. So I'll be out there for 3 weeks. Ooh, yeah, no, we don't like that. Maybe if you let me use the, hydraulic ram, I'll only be out there a week. Okay, but, we're concerned about the evenings. Could you stop at 3 o'clock? Or, I don't know, just hypothetically speaking. Maybe there'd be some opportunity for there to be some concessions or give and take, or at least create an understanding. That would be my best case scenario. Worst case scenario is
Yeah.
they're forced to have a meeting, the neighbors all come and are not happy, and he says, hey, I'm allowed to do this and I'm doing it.
Yeah. I mean, I
I
guess
don't care what you think.
my question would be like, what point, like, if I can't get through the ledge with the conventional tools and I have to use this thing, what's there to stop me? The community wouldn't stop me from moving forward. Yeah, I could still do it and do it during construction hours. So,
I think what Vinny says, the regulation and the notice, and that people are on the same page, and safety issues.
but, so they've already been noticed of the construction or the demolition.
Demolition.
If for in this case, a demolition. So
Well, in this case, they weren't
would they notice the demolition?
Yeah, but the
Notice-
demolition
It
wasn't
doesn't
to remove the
include-
ledge. Demolition
Yeah.
to remove the existing house that was on the lot.
I mean, I don't know if there's
Of course,
ledge,
but they
but
knew there was
Hill
construction happening.
Street and
But
Coolidge.
demolishing the house just for the laugh? Like they
No,
knew something was
but-
happening.
But again,
Yeah.
it's just, and again, people just, so
Better safe
a lot of the
than sorry.
questions that were raised, will this crack my foundation?
Yeah.
Will this, that, where's the extent of it, related to my property line? Those questions sort of can be asked ahead of time before the work starts, so that if a budding property owner wants to, take pictures of their retaining walls before the work starts, so you can document, are there cracks there or there not cracks there? So after the work's done, you take a picture and there's no cracks, and they do the
Yeah.
ram, and then afterwards you come in and take a picture and says, well, there's a big crack here that wasn't there before, and just so they know that liability now belongs to the contractor, to make
Sure.
make the abutter whole. It's just
So
it's just
why
that
couldn't they do that in this
well,
situation?
well, because they just showed up one day and started doing it, and they weren't aware. The neighbors weren't aware that they were going to do the work, and they'd already started doing the work before they actually got out there. And it's
I keep getting stuck on this part. The neighbors weren't aware that they were doing the work, so they got a notification the building was being demolished, and presumably that a new building was being put on there. So why I'm
Because it was
missing
an
this.
email from the contractor that said,
Yeah.
we're not doing any mechanical rock removal.
I get
And
that.
then-
Yeah,
and then
I get
they
the
showed
specific
up-
piece about this,
then
but
they-
it's,
so
it's
they-
not like everyone's surprised that there's suddenly construction
No,
materials
no,
there.
they were surprised that they used a
It's-
hydraulic rock breaker after they specifically said they weren't going to use
Because
it.
the house that was there before was very small and
was
on
built
top
on
of
top
the
of the
ledge.
rock.
Yeah, it was on top
They
of the
didn't
ledge.
need to.
And to be fair, a lot of that loose stuff that, the neighbors are complaining about against the bottom of the wall was just rubble. It was just removed with the excavator. That rock was not broken. They actually broke the rock where they put in the new garage, sort of.
Yeah. No, at the rear of the property, it was all rubble.
That was just like all sort of, because ledge has that, it's flaky. You can
Yep.
scrape it a lot of. So it's really, in my mind, it's not about, in my mind, the key element is proper notification of the abutters before the work starts, so they can be forewarned and forearmed to take whatever appropriate steps that they need to before the work starts.
So the contention then is that if they were notified about this specific piece of equipment, that would inspire or encourage someone to go take more remedial action, just as opposed to a demolition and a construction.
Right.
So
But-
really,
so-
that's the argument.
Well, you say things like, well,
That's not true.
I have an infant at home that sleeps during
Yeah.
the day. Okay, maybe we'll schedule our summer vacation during the 2 weeks.
But we're
where
talking
you
about very specific about this piece of equipment.
Yeah.
So if I got this notification and said, with the piece of equipment or without it, that wouldn't change my analysis of what's happening. I think we're doing that because we're Monday morning quarterbacking this thing, but I don't think that regular person is going to look at that and be like, oh, nope, let me check out the machinery here, and it has this piece, now I have to go do all this due diligence. It's not going to change anyone's behavior, whether it's listed there or not. Realistically. I mean, we can say that now because it happened and people were mad about it.
Well, no, it would have changed because they were told and had said they were only gonna use mechanical, and not this equipment, and then they did it anyway, but we didn't have anything in there.
Yeah,
to
I'm challenging the
right?
contention that that's going to change someone's ability to prep for something or not. That the listing that equipment would for the average person. I don't think that's true. But I mean, it's fine to say that.
Prep. What do you mean?
Like Vinny was saying, if someone was like, "Oh, this machinery's coming down the street," then maybe I'll go take a picture of my wall and my property and make sure that nothing's going to get damaged on
Well,
my
they would
side.
get notice beforehand, to Denise' point, right? Either in the demo.
About the
notice,
demo or
if
something.
it was a
Yeah, so that's my
surprise.
point. I'm saying if you, soon you get the notification, you're gonna do what due diligence you need, and I'm doubting that the level of equipment on there is gonna potentially change that due diligence. So
That's
I
really
guess it depends on the law.
it's really up. I believe it's up to the person. So like if
Yeah,
you go to
just-
if you go to like the historical commission and listen to the demolition debate, the vast majority of questions that the abutters ask is the noise, the dust. What are you going to do to
The trees.
is there asbestos in the air? Is this that? Sort of. And it's an opportunity for people to ask those questions ahead of time before the work starts to allay their fears. And I think some people, will undoubtedly never be happy. Other people will say, "Oh yeah, okay, no problem. You're gonna have spray water and keep the dust down. It's only gonna take literally 1 8-hour day to take the whole house down, and then we'll be gone." And if people have concerns, and I know people do that because they have kids at home and they're concerned about the dust, and they say, "All right, well, let me know what day you're doing that, and we'll go away for the day and just But
Yeah,
people can do it, and I would say the vast majority of people aren't going to do anything different. But our job is not to decide that. Our job is just to make sure people are notified. I believe our job is just to let people be notified before the work happens, so nobody's surprised.
no one's challenging that. I'm challenging that this inclusion would change someone's behavior. That's what I'm saying. I'm saying it wouldn't. And I mean, additionally, the part you're talking about, yeah, I mean, those questions can still be asked ahead of time. If I get a notification, there's nothing stopping me from coming down to community development and planning and saying, hey, we just received this notice, we have some concerns, we want to ask someone some questions. Town hall's open, you know.
Although
But I think
do that.
Oh,
that,
just
I'm saying,
one
so,
second.
a
But people
zoning-
just typically aren't notified if a building permit has it,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
There's no notification to abutters.
But in this case, that's bringing us up, they were. They
No.
were notice of the demolition.
Of the demolition, but the demolition happened months before
Yeah.
the digging of the foundation.
So if I saw the demolition, I can just, I mean, realistically, if I'm concerned about it and I saw the demolition, I would be pursuing that. I wouldn't just be like, oh, the demolition happened, now I can move on with my life. Like, I can reasonably conclude that something's happening on that
well,
lot.
I don't know, I think you might be giving too much credit to some people, because in other instances, I don't want to go down a different road, but when they're asked demo, it often is months later that the construction happens, and they're like, well, I thought they were just putting back, or I thought, like, why weren't we told what, at least note, what I hear a lot is, at least notify. It's like, oh, thank you, at least I just knew. And I know we can't contest it or whatever, but at least we knew what was going on and when it was gonna, generally happen within this month or whatever, a couple weeks, like.
Sure.
So it seems like there should be,
Sure. See, when are things
Because-
posted to the website? Like, when was
because
this
like
stuff
until you
first
go
posted?
through that kind of disruption, you don't realize the impact. Like, again, Watertown, we haven't had all this, we have a lot of construction going on, and we haven't been through and a lot of these things before, and we live really close to each other, and so in that notice, and you say it doesn't change behavior, but I think someone's coming for a building permit and it's on the checklist, or they look at the zoning and they're at least notified themselves as well. What their responsibility is, an expectation when they're doing the project of what the town wants to see me do as a homeowner or developer or a new owner that's new to Watertown. I don't know anybody like.
Yeah, I think it's,
Does that make sense? What I'm saying?
no, I get it. I think it's pretty clear where the committee wants to go with it. It'd probably be a recommendation to ask Steve to put together some language to the effect of what Vinny said of, if in that situation where it's a by right, where some
that.
ledge is found, then you need to have some sort of meeting afterwards. I'm just making the point that this is being put forward, just, again, it's a Monday morning quarterback situation. Just, oh, this happened, so we're gonna do this language that isn't necessarily, gonna affect anything, but we can say we did something about it. I mean, it's not really substantive.
Well, except, what we don't want to do is having had it once, we don't want it to happen like a year from now with another project. And
Yeah, I mean, we really
you know,
should.
it's
Some of these
it's
places
just now that it's been brought to our attention, we're just gonna add one extra step, which is just having the notification to the neighbors before you proceed with the work. And I just, first of all, there's not a lot of lots in Watertown that I think this would apply to, so I don't think it's going to be overly burdensome. But I think it may, we may put this language in here, and this situation may never occur again for the next 50 years. So
Do we have a geologic survey updated? Is that part of planning for buildings?
well, you don't know every subsurface of every lot.
No, I don't know how deep somebody would go.
But you can if you walk around, you can look, you can actually see.
Yeah, there are places
Certain
where
neighborhoods are more,
Sure.
that whole area where the little
Yeah.
school is, the whole little school
Yeah,
sits on
there's certain
a knob of
sections.
ledge, you can see it poking out of different places. You can
Is
see where
that is that just on Pleasant Street where they, and of course that was special permit, but lost the whole bank, that wasn't ledge, that was just
that was
fill,
just,
or-
that was
the grade.
a railroad
It was
embankment.
old
that was
railroad,
built up out of sand.
That's way back in the day.
Of course, people knew that was going to happen.
So that was a man-made structure.
Yeah, that was a man-made structure.
So anyway,
So, anyone
so do you
throw a
think, so
motion out
I
there?
would, my motion
Doing the,
would be to,
right.
ask, for an amendment to 8.00 to add a sentence that would say if ledge is to be removed on an as right, by right project, using a equipment-mounted hydraulic rock breaker jackhammer. And a community meeting will be held prior to such removal in accordance with 9.03 to discuss the extent. So basically, that first phrase
Yeah.
there. So does that, and that would be the motion that, and then bring that forward as a proposed, to the town council as a proposed zoning amendment. That would be my recommendation. So just take that, if the phrase, if ledges to be removed, the first part of that phrase. The second part, which says, then a community meeting will be held, all that language.
I mean, do you feel like there's a big downside to having 2 weeks and posting? Like, could there be? I'm forgetting 9.3. You know, the timeline of slowing people down too much. Is that maybe that could be modified too to be? I don't know.
Keep it consistent.
Just keep it consistent.
Yeah.
That-
Well, I'm
I-
just thinking in terms of the
doing-
right of the owner or developer who had their schedule and, you know, their workers.
Well,
Like,
that's-
maybe it's by department's determination of.
Well, the discussion is in there for a piece of it, but we really should keep it consistent for community meetings, because we would want someone to say, in this situation, do 1 week, in this situation, do 2 weeks, like having different standards for the community meetings creates tons of.
Well, but I mean, like you said, anyway, I just throw that out there. I would be interested to hear staff's opinion, because this is, like you said, isn't gonna happen often. It's an unusual situation. I'm just trying to be.
And it would be
fairness
a
to-
unforeseen site conditions. They wouldn't have known about it, so they would
Yeah.
have to, you know.
Well, what about when they know about it, though? That we're not addressing.
Because then it would already have been taken
Well,
care
if
of.
they knew about it ahead of time, like this particular
Yeah.
site, they would do that, you know,
You
But
would
how,
have,
but how
known
come we
about
couldn't
that.
enforce
while they do
when they
it.
said that they weren't gonna do that in the building permit? Why couldn't we, why did it go on for 2 weeks? if we
It
can't
actually
enforce
wasn't a condition of the building permit. It was
Oh, I
a
thought-
separate email.
It was
That was
just
just
an email,
a suggestion that he had
so
made.
it wasn't on the building permit?
No.
Oh, okay.
And part of the reason, you know, in fairness to Peter, that
Yeah.
he didn't know that email was in the file.
Yeah, okay.
So again,
So do you have a
Okay.
motion?
so that's the motion.
Wait, so it's not to come back to committee, it's just to go to, bring it to the council with
Yeah.
the amended change?
Yeah.
All right. Is there a second?
And can I,
Yes.
so, I mean, I can second for this and then I can ask my question about the other, I guess. So I'll second.
Seconded, discussion, Lisa, yes.
Is it, do you think it's practice now to have more specifics on characteristics of a site when demolition is gonna happen, like to just the building inspector goes? I mean, usually usually something's condemned, right? But I don't know.
No. It doesn't have to be condemned.
Or, right, but often it is, but if you, because if you come to historical commission, these are all things they would talk about, right? I mean,
Not the
Not
excavation.
ledge, not
well,
excavation.
but they would talk about the site there
Mhm.
and the plot and the neighborhood and everything, where if you're just doing by right or because something was condemned, then it's just the building inspector, like who knows? I don't remember seeing, in other words, in documents that this is checked off or verified, like we do with, you'll have road in it, you know, whether you need a fence, all the health department signs off.
Yeah, so
on this
various
aspect.
departments sign off on a demolition permit and various departments sign off on a building permit.
You know,
You know,
border
including
trees, I don't
All
know.
those different departments who would look at different
Yeah.
issues. That, I'm not, did that answer your question? I'm not sure.
This is excavation, not demolition. Just
Yeah.
there. It's a
Right,
completely
so-
different thing. So this has nothing to do with historical commission.
No, I know, but when, I guess that's my concern, it's two different things, you're taking down, but you know you're gonna have to excavate to rebuild.
Mhm.
You might not know what you're doing yet when you demo is the other thing, but, so is it just when you come for the building permit, not even,
That's
There-
why
there's a
it's a
checklist
by right
there.
it's a by right building permit. There's
no, I know, but is
site-
there a checkoff for that, the excavation characteristics that you're gonna do when you're doing by right, that,
No, there's not. Correct me
So
if
it's
I'm
just-
wrong.
No, there wouldn't be a checkoff. There is
but
there,
there, so if we put this in the zoning, when we say on by right project, that would then initiate a checkoff when they come for a building permit?
It
We put this in
wouldn't be
here?
a checkoff, it would be part of the plans that are submitted. So when an applicant submits a set of building plans, it would have, what they're gonna excavate and how they're gonna construct their foundation and their, walls and slab and all that. So if the applicant knows that he has ledge to remove, then he would indicate that on his excavation plans.
So in other words, if the council ends up, you modify the language and as suggested here by right, then that's affects internal operations versus being reactive, to Ken's point, that it's only quarterbacking afterwards, because there'll be a heads up when people come for a building permit per zoning that
If they know that it's there.
has to be.
And if they didn't know it was there, then obviously they're not gonna submit a plan how to deal with something they don't know is there.
Right, so if they don't know it's there, this would still say you could issue a stop work order and you'd have the community meeting. I'm just thinking how this
If you knew it was there,
Provision
presumably they'd have a plan
affects
for it, that,
operation.
Before the building permit.
yeah.
If,
They'd have some
if it
sort
was
of plan for it,
unforeseen
yeah.
site condition.
Yeah,
Once they discovered it, they would stop work.
Right.
And then have the meeting.
right, that's what I'm saying with this language in there, that in effect, the practicality of what would happen here on out if that gets put in.
Well, that would be, because now it's part of the zoning
Right,
ordinance,
that's
so
what I'm
they have
saying.
to comply. So what we are doing is removing sort of the informal communications.
Right.
They tend to get lost because they're not part of the official record, which is what happened on Salisbury Road.
How many other times has that happened?
One,
Ken's gonna
none,
keep reminding us
none.
that.
So,
Interesting.
So I'm gonna vote on something that will never happen again.
Which is fine. I mean, again, I don't think it's an insanely big deal, but we should be very careful with our language. Because again, this is one of those things where we put it into place and then, someone can say, you know what, oh, the town should have done this or could have done this. I don't think there were actions that the town took as a misstep in this situation. I think we've performed admirably and that the end result was great for all parties. So it's not a situation where the town was derelict in any duty. And by putting this language in place, it gives that implication. So, I mean, just that's more of
I
my.
don't think so.
I think, well,
I mean, we-
Often what we do is
how many more
reactive.
park gates we gonna close? I mean, it's that same reasoning, same. That's fine.
much like we put in the requirement for the community meetings ahead of time. I mean, it's just sort of a response to,
We do that for
right?
We do that for 10,000 square feet and more than 10 units, the 2-week requirement. That's a little different.
So anyway, so that would be my recommendation.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any other questions before we vote?
No, I just wanted to confirm that this went in there, that's the practical effect that
Yeah.
would take place.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Opposed. All right, and that's no more matters this evening. So motion to adjourn.
Okay.
Motion to adjourn.
Second. Lisa.
I just had a question before we adjourn.
Okay. Do it. Yep.
Well, so, and again, this isn't about the zoning, but, if you felt like, oh, we shouldn't be do zoning, is there a recommendation from Steve in terms of internal process where he feels like you don't need a zoning change, but there's something that they would do? Or you have to have this in order to get the community meeting to empower, if you want to have a community meeting.
Well, I mean, I think that was kind of the whole point of this tonight. This referral was to say that they want something more than just an internal process, something that says, oh no, the zoning delineates that this process has to be taking place in a certain way. So I think the point of the meeting tonight was to get some teeth in this type of situation.
Well,
Right.
in other words, to Steve's point, if it was written in the building permit, does the zoning office then feel it's enforceable to do a stop work order, but because it was an employee's internal email instead of written on an application, or? I'd just be curious to know, you could bring that forward later when thinking about this language you want to
Sure.
propose.
Yeah, I mean, that'd be different because the committee was asked to look at just the zoning piece of it.
Right, but it's
Yeah.
kind of the same thing with if Steve thinks that the process of community meeting and posting and all that should be exactly the same for this as for everything else, or not?
We tend to do that within the zoning, in the zoning codes, just having the same references to the same sections, so we keep those processes similar. But just something to think about, I think.
Could be
Okay.
flexible.
So
But,
there's
okay, second.
second,
So
all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.